This is lesson 25, part 4, and we'll be continuing with our rhythm reading practice. I'll be working through as many examples as possible in both simple and compound time in the hopes that you can use these videos as practice aids and references in the future, perhaps many months into the future, only as helpful to you. Returning to Sally K. Albrecht's Rhythm Workshop. With exercise 74 in the 6/8 section of our book. As always, we'll begin by looking at the time signature. Note that the time signature's top number is a 6. And recall that if the top number of a time signature is a 6, a 9, or a 12, we know we're in compound meter. If we're in compound meter, we know that the time signature is actually going to be telling us information about our subdivided beat or pulse note. So the top number of the time signature tells us that there will be 6 little beats in each measure. And the bottom 8 we can think of as the denominator of a fraction tells us that an 8th note will be our subdivided or little beat or pulse note. Because I'm in compound meter, I know that I'll need to do a bit of extra decoding to figure out what our big beat value or our dotted note value beat will be. So first of all, I'm just going to draw out one measure's worth of subdivided 8th notes. So I know I have 6 8th notes in each measure in 6/8 time. And then from there, I'll be able to figure out my dotted or big note value beat. Remember that my dotted note value beat in compound meter will naturally divide into 3 equal parts. So I know that a quarter note would be equal to 2 8th notes. And if we put a dot on it, it will be equivalent to those 3 8th notes. So I'll have 2 dotted quarter note beats in each measure in 6/8 time, and therefore I know I'm in compound duple meter because there are 2 big beats in each measure. So from there, I'm going to go over to my dotted note value pyramid and assign 1 beat to each dotted quarter note and 2 beats to each dotted half note. I also know that our dotted quarter note will be represented by do, using our Gordon rhythmic language, because do represents our 1 beat notes, and our 8th notes, or our 1/3 beat notes, will be represented by the Gordon rhythmic syllables do, da, di, and each of those syllables will represent just 1/3 of a beat. So the first thing I'm going to do in looking at example 1 is to draw in my big beats, my do beats. Remember, those will be our dotted quarter note beats, and they'll be equivalent to 3 8th notes each. So here's my first do. A do, da, di makes up that first do, and then another do here. Those are my first 2 big beats in 6/8 time. Do, and an 8th note plus 2 8th rests will finish out that dotted quarter note beat. Here's my next do, and that's the same pattern, an 8th note followed by 2 8th rests. My next do falls here for a nice do, da, di. Do, 8th note, 8th rest, plus another 8th note finishes out that beat. Here's my next do, and that's do, da, di. Do, again, 8th note, 8th rest, 8th note, finishes out that dotted quarter note beat. Same pattern here. Do, da, di. Next do, da, and of course this will be our silent or whispered or mouthed da, di. Do, da, di. Do, 8th note, 8th rest, 8th note, finishes out that beat. Next do, da, di completes that beat, do, da, di, and do 8th note with 2 8th rests. So I see a lot of 8th rests in this example, but you will notice it's actually a steady stream of 8th notes and 8th rests. So the question is just going to be, do we speak the syllable because it's a note on the page, or do we whisper, mouth, or just internally account for the syllable because it's indicated by a rest? So for example, looking at measure 2, if it's helpful, I could write out do, da, dee, do, da, dee. And I would say this as saying the do, whispering or mouthing the da, dee, saying the do, whispering or mouthing the da, dee. So for example, do, da, dee, do, da, dee. Okay. Looking at measure 5 as another example, I could write in my syllables do, da, dee, do, da, dee, and I will speak loudly my do and my dee, but I will whisper or mouth my da. So do, da, dee. I'll just do that measure once without worrying about keeping a steady beat in my hands or feet or putting the metronome on, just to start understanding the coordination of what my mouth needs to do to make that rhythm happen. Do, da, dee, do, da, dee. And we'll do one more measure like that, the very next one, measure 6. Do, da, dee, do, da, dee. Underlining the syllables we'll need to speak loudly, and then the mouth whispered or internally spoken syllables. It will sound something like this. Do, da, dee, do, dee. Setting the metronome at 50. Remember, this metronome pulse represents our big beat or dotted quarter note beat. And I'm going to be thinking before I even start tapping of my steady subdivided pulse of do, da, dee, do, da, dee, do, da, dee, do, da, dee. Now I'm going to clap my big beat. Ready, clap. Ready, speak. Do, da, dee, do, da, dee, do, 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 da, dee, do, dee, do, da, dee, do, dee, do, dee, do, dee, do, da, dee, do, dee, do, da, dee, do, da, dee, do, da, dee, do. Moving on to example 2. We're still obviously in the same time signature, and it's the same concept of a steady stream of eighth notes and eighth rests. So any of the practice techniques we just applied to example 1, you could apply here. I'm going to go ahead and pretty quickly mark in our big beats. So 3 eighth notes, 3 eighth rests, or any combination of that will amount to 1 dotted quarter note beat. So eighth note, eighth note, eighth rest is our first do, do, da, dee, 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 do, da, dee. 3 eighth notes, eighth note, eighth rest, eighth note, do, da, dee, 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 do, da, dee. Looking at measure 1, I just want to break that one measure down with you using syllables. You can do any other measures that would be helpful to you. You could even do the entire example without the metronome and without your hand tapping, just speaking and whispering or mouthing the syllables as is helpful to you. But I'm just going to focus on measure 1. Do, da, dee, do, da, dee. We're going to underline the syllables we need to speak, cross out the ones that fall right onto the rests, which are silences, and we can mouth, whisper, or internally speak those. So first of all, just speak these syllables and whisper the ones I don't need. Do, da, dee, do, da, dee. And then I could keep a slow but somewhat stable beat in my hand or foot. Ready, speak. Do, da, do, da. Setting the metronome at 50. We're going to keep this beat in our hands or feet. Before we do that again, trying to think of keeping a steady subdivided pulse going at all times, as much as is possible, either internally or mouthed or whispered, of do-da-dee, 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 do-da. Ready, clap. This is our big beat, our dotted quarter note beat. Ready, speak. Do-da, do-da, do-da-dee, do-da, 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 do-da-dee-do, dee-do-da-dee-do, dee-do-da-dee-do, dee-do-da, do-da, do-da-dee-do-da. Moving on to example 3, again, we're going to mark in our big beats, our dotted quarter note beats. So our first do falls here, 8th note, 8th rest, 8th note, complete that beat. 3/8 notes for the next do, 8th note, 8th rest, 8th note. Next do falls here, next do falls here, and it'll be a silent or whispered do, and then da-dee, do, same thing, silent do. Our next do falls here, do-da-dee, silent do again with a da-dee that'll be spoken. Next do falls here, 2 8th notes plus an 8th rest, do-da-dee, do-da, and then a whispered D, do-da-dee, do-da-dee, 8th note, 8th rest, 8th note, do-da-dee. And we're going to look at measure 3 together. So we have a do-da-dee, do-da-dee, and we're going to cross out our do, underline our da and our D, cross out our do. We'll plan on whispering, mouthing, or just internally accounting for that first syllable, underlining da and D. I'm going to try just saying with a pretty stable beat the syllables that I need to speak, and then mouthing or whispering the ones I don't. Ready, speak, do-da-dee, do-da-dee. And I'll try speaking that again with a relatively stable, slow pulse in my hands or my feet, but with no metronome on. Ready, clap. Ready, speak. Da-dee, da-dee. I slowed the metronome even a little bit more to 45 for our big beat, which is our dotted quarter note beat. I'm going to think of my subdivided pulse, my 8th note pulse. Do-da-dee, 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 do-da-dee. Those are my little beats. I'm going to keep the big beat in my hands or feet now. Ready, clap. Ready, speak. Do, dee, do, da, dee, do, dee, do, da, dee. Da, dee, da, dee, do, da, dee, da, dee, do, da, dee, do, da, do, da, dee, do, da, do, da, dee, do, da, dee, do, dee, do, da, dee.